Please. Our break time is over. Okay. Alain, well, now the floor is for you. You want to show with John.
John, I have a special, well, we have a special guest called John Crain. John Crain is the Vice Senior President and Chief Technology Officer at ICANN. And we are lucky that he accepted to join us today and update us on activities, projects going on at the Octo level, which we as the African technical community, we should pay attention to. So, so John, please feel welcome. And yes, I think you have some slides for us.
I do.
Okay, but I will first of all ask you to give a bit of your background, because we had some discussions where we were talking. I'm a geek. I don't do this. So I want John to give us an example of who you are, and then in the perspective of John the geek and the John the VP.
No pressure. Whoa, that's loud. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. I can't see most of you because I'm being blinded by a light. Well, thank you for inviting me. A little bit about me. So I'm John Crain. My current title is Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer. I have been at ICANN pretty much since the inception. I was ICANN's first Chief Technical Officer, running all the IT stuff. Before that, I was at an organization called Réseau IP European Network Coordination Center, or the RIPE NCC. So I was a director and a staff member at one of the early RIRs. Before that, I was designing machinery and building networks and just doing all kind of geeky stuff. So I guess I'm a geek that got into policy. You know, that discussion about the NOGs is really interesting, and there was a lot of truth in there about how we need to cross those boundaries. And I'm one of those people who gets to do some of that. So I'm going to talk about the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. And I've been asked to talk about some of the things we're going to do in one of the areas that works for me. I have two areas that report to me at ICANN. One is the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, and I think I'm giving a update on that tomorrow. And the other is the Office of the Chief Technology Officer. So I'm going to start off with what is Octo. Well, obviously it's the obvious thing, the Office of the Chief Technology Officer. We love acronyms at ICANN. So my group is called IROS that I run, and it's made up of Octo and IANA. So that's just the way we work at ICANN. We love our acronyms. So one way to think of the Office of the Chief Technology Officer is like we're a think tank. We are the part inside ICANN that sits and thinks and writes and investigates about technology. And the reason we do that is to help inform the community. So we have a little internal mission statement that we use with our staff to remind us why we're doing this, right? So we're just trying to improve the general technological stature of the ICANN community and the ICANN organization, and explain that technology to the various parts of the multi-stakeholder model. So, you know, we can be talking to NOGs. I think some of you saw Yazid get up to the microphone and says he may be wrong, but he suspects he's not. So he's one of our staff members that go out there giving technical trainings to network operators, but we also give trainings to government officials, law enforcement, folks from the judicial system, judges, etc., whoever needs to understand what's happening in the technical world. We have 4 basic parts to my organization. We have an ops guy with his team. You know, they do things like project management. If you're going to be a good engineer, you're going to have to do good project management. So we have a whole team for that. We have a group that does a lot of technical engagement. Yazidu is one of those folks. So they're the guys mostly out doing the training, talking to people, bringing that back. And they work closely with our other engagement functions. Some of you may know Pierre and Yalvi and all the folks here. They all work together to talk to people and go out and try and basically improve the technical stature of the ecosystem. And then I have not 1, but 2 research departments, and they could not be more different. So one of them is about security and stability and resilience, and the other is really about more general research around protocols and network technology. The SSR group is made up of PhD professors and doctors and is very, very academic in the way they do things. And the other group is network engineers, folks who work on protocols and building networks. You know, many of them are multiple times authors of RFCs that we all use. So it's 2 different, very different approaches to doing research and publishing, but together it really melds well. They work so well together, like doing research and doing peer review for each other's research. So those are those functions in a nutshell. And I know I'm between you and some kind of party, so I'm going to try and get us back on time. So what are we doing in the research area? You all think, well, ICANN, it's a governance thing. So let's talk about some of the technical research we're doing. I'm not going to go to all of these because, like I said, I'm trying to get to the party with you guys, but I'll leave them up for a second. So a lot of the time we do research in collaboration with other people. So you can see here that we are researching with Tsinghua University and looking at what we can see from mobile networks and what we can detect by looking at traffic from the DNS route. ICANN happens to manage one of the 13 root servers, but we also often get access through organizations like DNS OARC, the DNS Operations Analytics and Resource Center and Research Center. So we have a lot of access to data that we can go and look for patterns and figure out if interesting things are going on. You know, there's been a long ongoing discussion about TCP and the DNS and how it's going to destroy the world because we're all going to do session-based DNS and it's not going to scale, et cetera, et cetera. So we're doing some research on that. You know, how much of it is out there? Is it really causing issues? RPKI, something that's near and dear to the numbering world. It's resource public key infrastructure for routing. So how does that affect the DNS? If you look at the key servers that are used for the domain name system, are they using RPKI? Are they securing their routing? That's an interesting question we had. So here's a couple of interesting ones. So we developed a classifier for email. Like, why would ICANN develop an email classifier? It doesn't seem like in our remit or in our world. But we're interested in just how bad is the abuse of the domain name system. And often when we see reports, in this case, we were using data from the anti-phishing working group, they come in as emails. Just because somebody tells you something is a phish does not mean it's a phish. So the question we had was, can we take this data stream of I think, millions of emails. And can we apply machine learning, or as the fancy people call it now, artificial intelligence, to actually look at a stream of emails in real time and detect whether or not it was a form of abuse that we recognized. There's a paper on that. It's actually, that one is going to be on TrustCom. That's a big security conference. So a lot of these will go through academic peer review, and then later will become ICANN documents. So there's at least 2 on here that are actually going through an academic review, and then will later become ICANN documents once they've been presented at these academic conferences. Whichever one shall I pick on? Can we predict DNS abuse by looking at elements of registration data or elements of DNS traffic? Once again, using machine learning. We don't know the answer to this one yet, but it's an interesting one we're starting to work on. Is can we actually, determine that a phish is going to happen, and how accurate will that turn out to be? The reason we do all of this research is because we want to inform the discussion. So if somebody tells us, well, you cannot detect the abuse, then the obvious answer is, can we not detect it? Well, maybe we can. Can we apply science and technology to improve the status of the current technology? And can we communicate that to the industry through NOGs and the ICANN community, et cetera, to basically improve the ecosystem? So we also fund projects. Not most people don't realize this, but some of the research we don't do ourselves for various reasons. We might not have the skill set. It may be something that's in a little bit of a gray area for ICANN to be working on, so it's better to have a neutral third party. So there is an advisory committee inside ICANN called the Root Server System Advisory Committee. They wrote a paper, and there were some recommendations to conduct some studies about the behavior of DNS resolvers. So we paid somebody to do that study. Should be published by the end of this year. Blockchain names. Everybody's probably heard of those, right? So there is an archive that looks at what's happening in the blockchain world and gathers data and publishes it for the community. And we're funding part of that because we think it's of interest to the technical community and to the domain name industry in general. Here's a fun one. I told you we liked acronyms. Infermo. Man, somebody spent some time coming up on this one. This one's good. Inferential analysis of maliciously registered domain names. You can tell it was a academic scientist that came up with this one. So the basic aim of this is, can we look at the data around the domain name system, registration data, usage data, etc., and determine if particular factors drive the behavior of malicious registrations. So some people will stand there and say, well, of course, price is the thing that drives it. I've heard that 100 times. I've not really seen a scientific study that actually says that indeed that is the driver. There are many other things that may drive it. Jurisdiction, the fact that it's by a well-known hosting provider that is maybe more friendly to some of this badness. We don't know. So the University of Grenoble is doing this research. This is one of those where we think it's good to have neutral third-party academics do the work. So we are funding that work. ICANN has the world's worst URIs. We like to have really long ones. I'm sorry, I don't get to get a choice in this, but it's on the slides that will be shared later. I'm thinking that the results of that will probably come out early next year, but that's going to be an interesting one because that may affect policy. if we know what drives the bad guys, maybe we can do something about it through policy changes. Maybe we can't. We don't know. If we don't do the research, we don't know whether or not we can drive change. So there's a series of documents called the Octo documents. They're not very original. Office of the CTO documents. Also, unoriginally, we number them sequentially. So it started on 01 and we're at 40 or something now. So we got a few things that are looking at. One is a paper that has been written and gone into academic review, which is a lot about understanding whether parking pages are actually active pages or inactive. So there are parking pages that are literally just that. They're just a flat page with a bit of data on. And there are parking pages that are not. They actually have active data on them and things change. So can we actually differentiate between those? Can we use that information to help us understand what's happening? Now, if you're doing research around DNS abuse and what's happening in the ecosystem, then understanding the different types of parking pages is actually useful. So that will become a document. The classifier that I talked about, we're going to make that into an Octo document. I suspect we may end up releasing code around that. Although I will warn you, to run it, you need quite a lot of GPUs. The issue with anything with machine learning is it's not cheap, especially if you want to keep the data local and not use one of these free services out there. Reputation block lists, has everybody heard of them? Nobody's putting their hands up. Nobody's heard of reputation block lists. Does anybody here run a network? Not anymore. And yet he's the one who's heard of them. So, you know, these are lists of identifiers. They can be IP addresses. They can be domain names that are deemed by somebody to be bad. And you use that to defend your network users. How do you choose which ones are good and which ones are bad? Because there's dozens of them out there. It's not like there's only one or two. There are literally dozens of them. So some of our researchers have done some work on this, and they are publishing a paper on ways in which you can deterministically decide which block lists you want to use for certain purposes. So we use them a lot in our research. And we always get the question, why did you pick this one or that one? And the main reason we pick them is because they are well known and they are used in end boxes, etc., to protect networks. We think we can do a better job. So that's why we're going to release this paper. And I think other people have already indicated they'd be interested in using this methodology to actually pick their own defense mechanisms. DNSSEC error reporting. I've been told I shouldn't be too technical. So DNSSEC error reporting, when something breaks, what you want to get back is a message from the other end saying why it broke. Doesn't really exist fully yet. One of our staff is working on an RFC within the Internet Engineering Task Force, the IETF. That's where we go to write protocols, etc. And we will write an explainer so that it will simplify the language for folks to understand why this is important and why they should use it. It will get deployed because the resolver operators will do this. This is something that's been needed for a while. So we went and did the work. Internet fragmentation. That's a term that you hear a lot in governance circles, right? Does anybody know what it means? I hear people laughing, so I'm assuming they feel the same way about it as I do, right? So we're going to try and put some deterministic language around internet fragmentation and what it means technically, and also possibly other definitions that people are using. Because it's a word that gets thrown, well, two words, that get thrown around a lot in the governance discussions. But when you ask somebody what they mean, almost nobody can tell you.
So, yes, John, yes, allow me to stop you here. The internet fragmentation, is it the same thing like internet balkanizations?
That's another nice word that people use. Yes, internet balkanization. I honestly don't know because I don't know what they mean by that either. So we're going to write a document that's going to try and lay some of this out and will hopefully help people in the governance world understand, what it means technically to have a network that is fragmented in some way and what some of the other definitions are. Some of them are not technical, they are more political, or they're other things. So we're going to try and write a document on that. And then here's a weird one. DNS purchasing guides for government procurement officers. So this is one we did a while ago, and it talks about, are the devices you're buying using the latest technologies? Are they DNSSEC capable? Do they do support DNS error reporting? All the things that you really want when you're buying DNS equipment. Do you have a checklist that you can use? And this hopefully gives them a checklist. So we're busy. I want to talk briefly about another project we have, and you can talk to Yazid if you want to know the details, because I'm just an executive these days. I'm not actually a real engineer anymore, although this technically isn't really engineering. Kindness. Has anybody heard of Manners from ISOC? Right, about securing routing. Great program. If you've not heard of it, go look it up. So Manners is really about, can we secure the routing system, which is very important. And the routing, to me, is what DNS is to IP addresses, what DNS resolution is to the DNS, right? It's the way we actually use them. So because we're not very original, we came up with something similar. And we thought, well, if you had manners and a little bit of kindness, the world would be a better place. I think it's going to be a good t-shirt. And if you've been to NOGs, you know the t-shirts are probably the most important thing. So we struggled a bit, I think, with coming up with a name. Knowledge sharing and instantiating norms. Wow, that's a long word, for DNS. Basically, a series of best practices that anybody can do. Right? You don't have to be a DNS guru. You don't have to be a DNSSEC guru to do many of these things. And what we've done is it offers a self-assessment. So you can go to the website and you can look through it, answer some questions, and it will tell you what you need to do to be kindness compliant. And it lets you do the work. Oh, yeah, and down the bottom there, not quite online, it says, is pronounced kindness. We have to keep telling people that, because otherwise we can't do the manners and kindness joke. And everybody goes, kin DNS? What's kin DNS? Kindness, okay? Remember that. So we're basically targeting most of the ecosystem, right? ICANN generally deals a lot with what we call authoritative name servers. Mainly the TLD operators, right? That's kind of where our world is. But if we want a more secure and stable domain name system, we have to reach beyond that. So not just the TLDs, but also the second level domain holders, the businesses, the ISPs, the folks running authoritative name servers for their customers. We want them to participate. And then we also want to talk to the resolver operators. So even if you have a closed resolver for your business, there are some certain basic norms that you should follow. So we have those. Shared private, that's kind of an internet service provider, right? That shares it with all its clients, but doesn't let people on the outside do it. Actually use their name server, right? That's very common. If you're an internet service provider, you have name servers that your customers use, but you don't let the guy down the street use it. And then, of course, there's the public ones, the 8.8.8.8, the 7.7, now all these ones where they got the quads, there's a lot of them. So we want those to participate, and some of them are. And the general idea is, if we can get people to do basic hygiene, do some of the basic standards, we can actually harden the core a little bit. We're not going to solve every problem for every DNS server, but if we can give some basic guidance, and we worked a lot with people in the industry to actually come up with these norms. It wasn't me, it wasn't even Yazid. It was a group of industry folks from NOGS and other places. So, you know, whichever one of these areas you're in, it's only half a dozen, 6, maybe 8 different practices. And some of them are just fundamental. Having more than one name server, right? If you're an ISP, you may laugh at that, but they're out there. There are people that just don't have multiple name servers. Making sure your software is up to date. You know, can your resolver actually authenticate DNSSEC or not? Not even is it turned on, but can it actually do it? Things like this. So there's a website. I think I've called us back some time. And my phone's not working. That's good. So if you want to know about kindness, here's the website, but talk to Yazid. He's here. And with that, that's a little bit of what we're doing. There is the kindness website. It's very pretty. There's the self-assessment form. It's also very pretty. So if you do it and you want to print it off and take it to your managers and say, here's this security thing, let me spend some money on it, because we all know that you don't spend money on security until after it breaks. We've had a couple of people use this as actually a tool to go and say, look, you know, here's some simple, cheap things we can do to improve our network. So yeah, please look at it. If it's for you, if you're a DNS operator, then, you know, go through the self-assessment on your own. You know, we don't have to see it. You can just figure it out for yourself, whether it's worth doing some of the things that we suggest. So thank you, everybody. I know I'm the last speaker. So
Yes, yeah, thank you, John, for this insightful update. So now, questions, comment? No, after we
he doesn't want you to
after
clap
we
for
throw
me.
the question on John, and then we'll see how he performed, then we can see the level of upload we give. Questions, comment?
What do you want to know about ENS? We're trying to understand how it precisely works. So a lot of these blockchain naming spaces, they often promote themselves that these names are immutable. So they talk about immutable names, names that cannot be changed. And then you have a lot of discussions and you find out, well, maybe they're not as immutable as they say they are. This is important because an immutable name, maybe I shouldn't use that word, a name that cannot be changed, cannot be affected by policy. If you technically cannot change it, you can write all the policy you want in the world and it doesn't help. But if it is changeable, then maybe the ENS folks, because it's their policy, not ours, can actually define policy around this. So if you come to ICANN meetings, which you're going to think, oh my God, it's a governance meeting, you know, I don't want to go to that. We actually have technical sessions, and one of the sessions we have is called Emerging Identifier Technologies. And we had the gentlemen, a few of them from ENS come and talk to the community. And there were a lot of questions about immutability, especially from people who were in the public protection industry, law enforcement, etc. So we're trying to understand exactly how does it work. You know, a lot of these newer technologies, they're not designed in the Internet Engineering Task Force. They don't publish every single thing they do. Right. So if you have something that a protocol that you've done through the IETF, you have to publish that as an RFC. It has to be under scrutiny. If you're doing this in a different environment, you may publish certain things, but you don't necessarily publish everything. So we're doing research around that. At the upcoming meeting in Hamburg, the folks from Unstoppable Domains are coming to talk to us. So, it's important to remember that these emerging technologies, they're very interesting because they may present really interesting ways to evolve the ecosystem, and they may not. So we have to understand them, and that's what we're doing. We're trying to figure out exactly how does it work, because honestly, we don't know. No, commercial feasibility is not something, that we're really that interested in, because it's not our namespace, it's their namespace. And, one of the issues with these namespaces is, well, there are dozens of them, if not more. So if you are going to look at a particular namespace, how do you choose them? It's actually a really interesting policy issue, is that as other identifier systems emerge outside, I'm going to say the IETF, because that's where all the ones that ICANN deals with comes from. How do they interact? Do they cause questions or issues? If a name is truly immutable and a bad guy is using that, how do you prevent that? Because I don't think we want to be in a world where bad guys can just do whatever they want and the technology blocks them. Now, I suspect there are ways to actually solve this in all of these technologies. But, we don't know. So that's why we engage them and they come talk to us.
Well, thank you. Mark?
We have one over here.
Okay. We have one question. Okay. Please go to the mic, but please be brief. Please be brief. Yeah.
Saying I'm disappointed that you aren't appropriately dressed to be the IANA, t-shirt, jeans, slops, or actually barefoot like Mr. Late Postel. But what I'm wondering is the comment you've just made about other domain spaces or other namespaces. The IETF, produced the namespaces that are relevant to ICANN today. Is ICANN in a position to actually consider other domain spaces in a non-advisory capacity? I mean, is that the direction that we have to move? Because namespace matters beyond IETF technologies. Yeah.
So firstly, this is not my IANA presentation. That's tomorrow. I will dress accordingly. I'm sorry to have insulted you, but this is ICANN. We're governance people. You're lucky I'm not wearing a tie. So it's interesting. So we participate heavily in the Internet Engineering Task Force. So I don't really see it as them as kind of thing, right? We're all in that. When things are documented in an RFC, and I don't mean a individual submission, but one that actually goes through work party, that becomes much easier for us as a community to actually understand it and recognize it. So, one that has been through, like .onion, that's not going to be in the public space, right? Because there is a RFC that clearly defines its use. It's been through, it's not a multi-stakeholder model truly, but it's that IETF model that has always been used to develop the protocols in an open, documented standard. In case you can't tell, I'm a big fan of the IETF. I used to be allowed to go there before I started dressing like this. So yes, and oddly enough, if you look at the latest one, .alt, look at who wrote it. I believe one of the authors is an ICANN staff member. We allow our staff to participate in the IETF and to do what they think is best for the protocol development stuff. It's, it's kind of at a side of what we do, but it's very important to us. So if you do want to go to the IETF, I heard that none of you really want to go. I think you should. The Internet Engineering Task Force is where all these protocols are developed that we rely on every day. We just keep the databases. We got the boring bit.
Yes, I was calling Prof for the closing, but
ENS, and I wanted to just join and also add some more. Clearly, it depends on blockchain platform, right? And I'm wondering whether apart from Ethereum ones, you have looked at the other ones and do they share the same immutability problems, or they may have different risks? For instance, the smart contract risks, maybe, I don't know. So I thought I would raise that, yeah.
So the question was whether they share similar problems,
Yes.
similar and different. They're not all the same. I mean, this is in some ways part of the predicament, right? Because if they were all the same and they were all following a similar protocol, you could go to the IETF, you could document the protocols, the way we're used to doing things in the internet world, and life would be a lot easier, but they're not. They're all slightly different. They have different models, different policies. So it's not, you know, you're probably sitting there thinking, well, you guys should know how this stuff works. Well, it's just not that easy. There's a lot of them out there, and we discover new ones all the time. And, you know, alternative namespaces have been around long before blockchain, right? Blockchain's a cool technology. It has some really good uses. It may have uses within the DNS. I've not seen them yet, but I'm not going to discount it, because I believe that the network always needs to evolve. We always need new technologies and new ways of doing things. The question is, can we do it in a manner that does not disrupt this slightly important ecosystem that we have, where just a few dollars of the world's economy run across it? You know, it's, the days are gone when you could just disrupt the entirety of the network, because it is now so ubiquitous and so important to the world. So, personal opinion, I prefer it when protocols come through an open process and are well thought through and documented. But I'm a geek. What do I know?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. I think we can continue the conversation. Yeah. Oh, big round of applause for John.
You don't have to mean it.
John. So I think John is here for the week, and then we have issues to discuss with John. So I think we're supposed now to have a